Okay, Rick Tittle, ladies and gentlemen, from Titillating Sports in San Francisco.
Tom, this is so great because I'm used to interviewing you, the international raconteur that you are. So this is it's a real honor to be on your pod, your ep, as the kids would say.
I love doing your radio program because it's a sports talk program, and I think I've done it 5, 6 times, and we've never talked about sports once.
Sports is only one of my interests. Not that I'm the most eclectic person in the world, but it's just one of the things I'm interested in. And I realize that when comedians come in, the last thing I'm going to do is be one of these guys who says, do your set or put jokes on a tee. I really don't have too many ideas where it's going to go. I might write down 3 or 5 questions, but other than that, it's all about, as you know, you just listen, and you might take it somewhere that I never thought, and then I'll think of something. And so I just like that sort of free form, kind of like what we're doing now.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is I think you're bigger than sports, Rick. I think
Thank
you're
you so much.
you're ready to move up to other topics.
All right, what do you suggest?
No, I love it. I love talking to you, and it's a joy when you guys let me go into the free giveaway closet, and I've gotten so many good books.
So being just so people know what Tom's talking about, we're a nationally syndicated show. So PR companies always want to get their people on the show so they can say, look, we had a reach. We're on the American Forces Radio Network. They can say, our client got in 177 countries. And so over the years, we get a lot of DVDs and CDs and books people send us hoping that we'll do interviews. We probably do about half of them. Some of them are just a good fit. But they pile up. They're free. And over the years, it's basically kind of like this free flea market. And no one has partaken like Mr. Rhodes here. He is a voracious reader. He's the only person in the world who looks forward to long, bumpy flights because he can get in a lot of his reading. And so, yes, we're glad that somebody walks out of here with a dozen books. Why not?
So you're also a big reader. It's one reason we get along and why we have such good conversations. So what are the... I don't like fiction.
Neither do I.
But then again, some of my favorite books have been fiction books. That there's exceptions to the rule, but I'm a nonfiction guy. I don't like bullshit. I like the real. I don't like the made up.
Right.
So I love historical things. I love biographies, and I just get off on knowledge. So what are some of your favorite topics?
I also have a thirst for knowledge. I'm embarrassed by all the things that I don't know, and I have some sort of flaw in me that while I can go to a fictional movie and go, oh my gosh, aliens, if I read a book, and my mom and dad would say over the years, oh, this is a great spy novel. It was a dark and stormy night. He was in the Chevy. I'm like, someone made this up. It never happened. I can't get past it. Closest is probably historical novels, Robert Graves, I, Claudius, and Messalina the God, some of that stuff. But I was a history major.
I never read I, Claudius, but that old
Derek Jacobi.
BBC PBS thing I actually own on DVD, and I'm reading about the life of Seneca now.
Oh.
And so Claudius had Seneca exiled and felt that he was a threat, and it's interesting how Roman history and things I'm interested in all tie in together.
That PBS series, I'm a little bit older than you, was one of the main reasons why I was a history major. I was fascinated by Rome. And when I was 18 years old, I spent 17 days in Rome, living in these flophouse pensione. It was an amazing time. But I also like travelogues, like I love Bill Bryson. But it's mostly military history, and I try to stay away from historians. Like Stephen Ambrose, obviously, I would read. He's a great writer. But I like people who were not correspondents or historians. I like people who were there, maybe don't fancy themselves as writers. And I'm always fascinated at the choice between running out of the foxhole and staying. And I've kind of seen over the years that the main reason people stay in the foxhole is not religious, it's not for their country, it's so they don't let the other guy down. That is the bond that as we know from Henry V, St. Crispin's Day, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. They are a band of brothers, and they don't want to let that other guy down. And so
that was my father's favorite quote of all time.
St. Crispin's
that in the future the men will they'll feel shame that they weren't with their brothers on St. Crispin's Day.
The men asleep in England now will count themselves accursed for not having been here. The Battle of Agincourt. This is what we're going with right now.
I love it, man. Now, I have some historical obsessions. The Battle of Little Bighorn, I can't read enough about it. The French Revolution is another big one. Ancient Rome. What are some of your historical obsessions?
I got into World War I big time a few years ago, and I spent basically 10 years just reading World War I books.
I just started. That's great that you say that. I just because I'm so obsessed with Paris. I found this book on Paris in World War I, and like everyone goes crazy about World War II, but like the world completely changed in World War I, and then Paris in particular from 1880 until the beginning of World War I in what, 1912, 1913? 14?
January 28th, 14th. It was my birthday, actually, January 28th. That was when Archduke Ferdinand was shot.
No shit.
In Sarajevo, yeah. But I think about the taxis of the Marne. Those are Parisian taxis rushing soldiers and citizens to the Marne River. Otherwise, that von Schlieffen plan, Paris might have been taken. And that's when the Western Front got set up. But I'll recommend a book to you that I loved, if you like Custer and Little Bighorn. It's called The Class of 63. And it's about West Point and about how these guys are 19, 20 years old, and they have to divide now, and almost all of them are made colonels or generals because they're the only ones with military training. And Custer, I wish I can remember the name of the guy that he fought against, but it was like his roommate at West Point, and he was now a Southern general, and they had won the battle, and Custer went to see him, and the guy was wounded and crying, and Custer took a big wad of money and put it in his pocket. He's like, we're on opposite sides, but you're one of my best friends. It's a fascinating book about how at West Point just stopped, and the Southern guys went to the South, and George Armstrong Custer was one of those guys. Of course, bucked back down to colonel by the time the Lakota Sioux had their way with him.
Well, there's a great book that I will recommend to you, and it's called Custer and Crazy Horse. And that's my favorite book that I've read on it. And both of these legendary warriors had both been demoted by their tribes right before their most famous battle.
I didn't know.
Custer had abandoned his troops. He was so arrogant. He had plans for going into political office after his. He kind of thought he was bigger than the military. That's why he had his own. He designed his own outfit. There was no one else that dressed like him. So he missed his wife. Oh, and by the way, there was a squaw, a woman given to him, daughter of a chief by one of the Sioux chiefs, that Custer was fucking, and but he abandoned his troops and took a train back to Michigan to visit his wife. Wow. So he got in big trouble for that, and then the U.S. Army demoted him, and then Crazy Horse was in love with this girl as a teenager, and then they would go off and hunt for a few days. And so when there was a hunting expedition that went out, this guy in the tribe said that he was sick and he didn't want to go. And then while Crazy Horse was gone, he married this girl that Crazy Horse was in love with. So Crazy Horse was still in love with her, and then at one point he took her and ran away with her. And then this guy who was married to the woman shot Crazy Horse in the face. There's only like 2 depictions of Crazy Horse, they're drawings, and his cheek has like a chunk out of it. The guy shot Crazy Horse in the face. Wow. So even though he was like respected warrior, and they felt that he was a shaman in the tribe, he was demoted from his rank of general, shaman, whatever, before the Battle of Little Bighorn. So it was interesting that both of them had been demoted by their tribes right before the Battle of Little Bighorn. And then some of the Sioux Native Americans couldn't understand why Custer was fighting them at that battle because when you give someone your daughter, that means your family. So when the battle was over and they found Custer's dead body, some accounts say that they cut off his penis and stuck it in his mouth. That one may or may not be true, but they did punch holes in his ears so that in the next life he will listen better.
Oh, wow.
When they found his dead
That first one, I think, that's more of a mafia deal.
Did the dick in the mouth. Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
That's,
and then if you're SNL, dick in a box.
So that he might please others in his next life.
That's great Crazy Horse knowledge. And I would say the last girlfriend I would ever steal would be from a guy named Crazy Horse.
Well, I did a joke years ago that it's important to remember that Crazy Horse didn't just start out as Crazy Horse. He had to work his way up to it. You know, first he was Wacky Horse, then he was a little out of control horse, then he was needs to be closely monitored horse, and then he became Crazy Horse. So,
gotcha.
Like anything, you got to earn it.
Very good. Well, it's like in his earlier days, it was probably running bull and then walking bull when he got old. He had to sit down. One of those
needs
deals.
a cane bull.
Sure. Maybe a little rascal bull if he lived longer. Being one of those things.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, the Rascal Scooter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Not Spanky and Alfalfa.
That's exactly where my mind went to. I was like, what does Buckwheat have to
Whenever
do?
Whenever people say Little Rascals, that's my first thing I think of too. Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in the East Bay here, right around Oakland, California. Richmond, California is where I was born, but lived in Oakland a couple places. And my mom's side of the family is like DAR, going back to the 1700s, which is my great-grandfather.
DAR?
Daughters of the American Revolution.
Oh, okay.
You know, moving its way across the country, all the wars. Probably my most interesting ancestor is my great-great-grandfather named George Washington Williams, who fought for the North in the Civil War in the Hoosier Regiment, and then was an Indian translator in the cavalry. My dad's side of the family is the Ellis Island deal, so he's first gen. I have one grandfather from Denmark who died before I was born. So I have relatives in Germany and Denmark, so it's kind of cool when I go back there that I can freeload off of them. And those are kind of like my home bases when I went to Europe. And I know you are basically a citizen of the Netherlands at this point, are you not?
Well, I don't know. I'm getting divorced now, so maybe I'm going to lose that. Now, I'm a big fan of the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. I love everything about, like I lived in San Francisco, and I moved here because, I'm from Florida, and my family are all very right-wing Christian people, and San Francisco to me was my left-wing utopian ideal. Mm-hmm. And then and I lived here, and it made me a better person in every way. But then when I went to Amsterdam, I felt like Amsterdam was San Francisco times 1,000, because they actually implement things in their national laws, like universal health care and affordable education and
legal prostitution,
gay rights, gay marriage, euthanasia,
adults in Africa.
They have a history of welcoming.
Yeah. That's a bad people. Euthanasia. I'm bringing this podcast to a screeching halt. I'll do the jokes, Rick.
So have you always lived in the Bay Area, or did you go out?
I've always lived in the Bay Area, but I've spent a significant amount of summers and time on the continent. And then also, because of my love of soccer, I was a writer for this paper called European Soccer Weekly. So spent a lot of time in England. One of my favorite things I got to do in England was I played college football, and I got to coach the Metropolitan Police Department football team as a guest coach for a few weeks. And they do have an American football team. It's in Bushey, which is near Watford, in Hertfordshire, which we would call Hertfordshire. And they would say, I've learned more today than I ever have in my life, coach. And they would say things were delightful. Just things you would never, ever hear. I remember one time, the biggest guy I ever saw, he looked like Evander Holyfield. He came over one day, and I said, what's your name? And I thought it'd be like, yeah, my name is whatever. He's like, hello, I'm Peter. You're right. It's lovely to meet you. I'm like, hello, Peter. Is that all right? Lovely, man. It's just the way they talk, And but that was a great thrill. But I'm mostly Eurocentric. Like, I've never been to Asia or Africa or South America. Canada and Mexico, just a little bit around here, but I'm so Euro trash when it comes to all that.
So, what do you love most about soccer? I mean, I think it's the one true world religion.
It is the planet's game. There's no doubt about it. I think what it is for me is the two things stand out. Number one, the fluidity, why it's the beautiful game. It just goes. It doesn't stop. You don't need to hand the ref the ball like in the NBA. You're not taking timeouts. It just goes for 45 minutes. You take a break, and then it goes again.
You know there's going to be 90 minutes. There's going to be a 15-minute intermission.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And the other thing is...
Not like 20 timeouts at the last 5 minutes.
Exactly. And the other thing is the high stakes. And people wanted to make the goals bigger. They're already as big as a house. They're 8 yards long. They're 8 feet high. And to me, if games were 20-19, I think soccer would be boring. It's the fact that, I remember I had Eric Winalda on the show, who's a former USA striker. He said, can you imagine Michael Jordan scoring 36 points, but it was all in one basket? Think how excited he would be if that basket counted for 36 points. And so I just love the high stakes. You're always on a knife edge between euphoria and disaster. And it's also the international flavor of it. I think that's why I like hockey a lot too. It's just so international. And then my first World Cup that I really got into in 1982, Spain, then a light bulb went on over my head because I didn't have the exposure to it here. Then the light bulb went on, like, wow, this really is the most important thing was the World Cup.
Yeah, I got into it. My mother's from Argentina, but it was living in Holland, and the Dutch are, so into the world game. I started to like it, and then I went to Argentina, and they're out of their minds with passion. I went to a match that ended in a riot. They had to...
Wow. Is that Boca Juniors River Plate? Or
no, it was actually River Plate versus Quilmes. Quilmes is a factory town 20 miles outside of Buenos Aires. Quilmes was losing 4-0. The home fans were so angry at their own team's poor performance, they set fire to their own stadium. And then these lunatics are trying to get onto the field.
Wow.
Like 40 or 50 people trying to climb this razor wire. And then like 100 riot police went streaming across the field in helmets and batons, and they were beating people off the fence, and then they shot tear gas into the stands.
Wow.
And it was unequivocally the greatest night of my life.
And I was thinking, you being in Amsterdam, when they built the Ajax Arena in 96, they came up with a great solution to razor wire, and that was to have a 12-foot deep cement moat. So if you tried to run on the field, you'd fall down, break your leg, and then you're down there and you can't get out. It's a humane way. They don't kill you, but you're not getting on the field.
I did not know that about Ajax. Historically a Jewish team. They still get anti-Semitic chants when they play around Europe.
My favorite team, Tottenham Hotspur, had historic Jewish ownership, and they're called the Yiddos and the Yids, and they still, when you go to a Tottenham game at White Hart Lane, and now they have the new stadium, but they go... Yids. That's just their thing. But then a couple
I
years
asked you
ago,
not to bang on
I
the
know
table.
I did. It's precisely what you told me not to do. I'll tell you a little story. One time I worked at a bookstore when I was younger, and we went through this training, and it said, whatever you do, don't touch anyone. Let people steal everything. We're insured. It's not worth it. And it was this training film. Then I went out, and a guy tried to steal something, and I stopped him. And they're like, you just watched the film. I go, I know, I'm an idiot. So
you never know how you're going to act in a certain situation.
Reverse psychology works on me, I guess.
I think one of the most fascinating things about soccer that any Hungarian person I meet, one of my habits is inflicting trivial knowledge onto others.
Yeah, me too.
But this isn't trivial. This is the most important thing that most people don't know is that the modern game of soccer was invented by the 1950s Hungarian national team. The total football attack, because it used to be, passing and, keeping it away. And they went with the balls out, let's attack at all time. And I think their star player was called Pushkin or
Ferenc Puskás.
That's it. You know it. Puskás.
Yeah. The Mighty Marjars, as they were known, they were the first team to beat England in England. And that, at the time, think about it, that was an impossibility.
Yeah.
You're not going to ever beat us. Yeah, he ended up playing for Real Madrid, still one of the top 5 players of all time before our time. But yeah, he's the most famous Hungarian player.
That's the sure. I'm impressed that you knew his name. Pushka.
Ferenc Puskás, yes. Soccer is my deal. That's my favorite.
Okay, so let's lay some other facts on me.
Okay, what would you like to know?
When Pele won the 1970 World Cup, he jumped up and down in the dressing room screaming, "I'm not dead. I'm not dead. I'm not dead." That was his 3rd World Cup that he won, I think.
70 in Mexico City. That's still regarded as the greatest team of all time. Remember,
that was the first color broadcast. So, and Brazil had these beautiful colored outfits.
Still regarded as the greatest save ever. Gordon Banks, who recently passed away, saved from Pelé. But when he was a teenager in Sweden in '58, that was the first time a team won outside of their hemisphere. And that's why I picked France to win in '98, because they were at home and everyone's like, oh, they weren't going to do. That's the only time I got it right. But you think about the early World Cup with Jules Rimet, a Frenchman who started it. A lot of teams didn't go, like Germany, and they're like, well, this is stupid. What a waste of time. It took a while to catch on. So you see, oh, look, Uruguay won a World Cup. Yeah, they were at home and not everybody was playing.
Right.
So, yeah, you got to keep it a little bit in perspective. But I'll tell you something funny about the 1970 team. One of their great players was named Rivellino. And Rivellino became a broadcaster. So at the World Cup here in '94, I was working in the media center because I was working in TV at the time. So I volunteered. That was probably the funnest fortnight of my life, working down there. And so Rivellino came over, and that day I was in charge of the faxes. And people were faxing stuff all over the world. And one of the World Cup sponsors was Canon. The cameras and the faxing.
Yeah.
And so Rivellino comes up, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's Rivellino, but I don't want to say anything. He's working as a broadcaster, and he's like, yes, I want to fax this. I tried 3 different times, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, it's just not working. And he put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, my friend, it is not your fault. It is Canon. They are the worst. Everyone in Brazil, don't buy Canon. It is not your fault. It is Canon. So whenever I see it, I think, it is Canon. They are the worst. So this brought to you by Canon. Make sure to check out the new
Rebel. That's funny. I love Canon. That's all I've ever owned was Canon cameras.
SLR Rebel, recommended by Andre Agassi. But anyway, I just thought that was funny that Rivellino and I had a moment over a fax machine, which is better than nothing. I'll take it.
That's beautiful. I shared an elevator with Gordie Howe once.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a funny elevator story?
Yes, please.
Lionel Messi, right?
I've never heard of him. Is that the Lionel train maker?
A few years ago in Barcelona, we're here in San Francisco playing a friendly. And I was at the Intercontinental Hotel on Howard Street, and this is when Pep Guardiola was the coach. I got to ask a question, which was, Samuel Eto'o's gone, Zlatan Ibrahimovic is in, what's that like? They had all 3 cups, the Copa del Rey, the European Cup, the La Liga Cup. And so I'm thinking, wow, I asked Messi a question, that's pretty cool. I go to the elevator, he gets on, just him and I. No bodyguards.
Wow.
He about 5'3", maybe 80 pounds. But I guess he had told his handlers, I'm going for a walk, and I don't want bodyguards. So I come out of the elevator, it's he and I, and we walk down the street, and there was already a throng of about 1,000 people just to see a glimpse of him. So now they're in this state of felicity because here he is. I'm walking with him down Howard, and I see the looks on their faces. And that's the only time I got a glimpse into the kind of effect a superstar has on people, because this was the greatest moment of their lives. So I walked about 2 blocks with Messi. People probably thought that I was with him.
What year is this?
This was 6 years ago, maybe?
Wow, that's incredible.
Right here in downtown. And it's funny, this woman came up to me after I left, and she said, what's all the fuss about? I go, that's the best soccer player in the world. She's like, oh, okay, never mind. So, but that's my elevator story.
Hilarious.
Me and...
About 5 years ago, I was walking by City Lights, and, I wasn't walking by it. Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who just turned 100,
wow.
He was giving a reading, and City Lights was so packed you couldn't get in, and so I was looking through the window at this great man, and 2 young hipsters walked by, a boy and a girl, and the girl goes, what's going on in there? And the guy looks, and he turns to her, and he goes, just some old dude. It's funny. The woman was unimpressed that it was a soccer player.
Yeah. It's American for the most part. Sorry. For the most part. It doesn't resonate, I would say.
That makes me happy to think of Lionel Messi walking around San Francisco.
Yeah. You never know who you're going to bump into. At a bagel shop, I bumped into, who's the guy from the Black Crowes, Chris Robinson? He was married.
Chris Robinson,
married to
yeah,
Kate
I used to love that band.
or made, not Kate Upton, what's her name? Kate
Hudson.
Hudson. And he just was ordering a bagel, and I thought, what is he supposed to do? Have a limo driver deliver it to him? It's just people, right?
Yeah. I never gamble, and was never any good at it. Any bets I ever made, excuse me. But I did bet on the last World Cup. I bet France to win, and then and then my sentimentality, which always
Francophile
does me in. I put 100 on France and 100 on Argentina to win, and I won. $600, and then minus the 100 I put on Argentina.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I won $500.
Not too bad.
It was awesome.
I think about Hugo Lloris, who's the France goalie and the Tottenham goalie as well, my team. He had the worst moment of his life with that ridiculous goal he gave up, but it didn't matter because they won the World Cup. And I thought, what's the juxtaposition of you're celebrating the greatest moment of your life while you just did the dumbest thing you've ever done in your life, too. But it trumps it, I thought that was kind of a weird little, I don't know, catch-22 in a way, if I can use that.
What are some other knowledge nuggets that you can blow our minds with?
Knowledge nuggets. You don't want fart jokes?
Nah, it's not this kind. It's not our kind of podcast.
I don't have any fart jokes. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think I ever really grew up. I still feel like I never, and this isn't to shun people who had to go through this. I never had to find myself. I feel like I'm the same guy I was when I was 14, just more experience with a little more knowledge. I still love video games. I still dress like I'm going to a cockfight. I just wear a t-shirt and jeans. And then, next thing you know, you're 53 years old, and you're like, how the hell did that happen?
Well, it's interesting because I have been constantly seeking to better myself, and several times moved very far away to become a different person, to educate myself or go to a different phase. I feel like I'm at a crossroads in my life now.
You are. When you were in Amsterdam, because we all take these things for granted, how often did you go to the Rijksmuseum or the Anne Frank House and do that stuff?
The Rijksmuseum, I lived right next to it. The Anne Frank House I went to when I first went to Amsterdam. And, it can be a bummer. It depresses you to think about, these innocent people being murdered. But I would go to the Van Gogh Museum a lot. I went there a few times with the headset and listened to the descriptions of the paintings and the history of where he was at in his life. And then I lived so close to it, I would sometimes, in the off season when it wasn't too crowded, I would smoke pot and then go walk around there and listen to music on my headphones. And then the Rijksmuseum has got a tunnel that you ride bikes through.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
And I'll tell you a story about that in a second. And then there's Museumplein. Right behind the Rijksmuseum is this Cobra Cafe, which is a great place. I would always meet people when I had meetings. And in the men's room, there's a waterfall urinal. It's kind of cool to pee into a waterfall.
Sure.
And then so you got the big Museumplein, and then there's the Van Gogh Museum. So sometimes I would take a soccer ball out to the Museumplein and kick it up next against the wall of the Van Gogh Museum.
Wow.
And I always pictured his paintings, kind of shaking on the wall, but I think it was a sturdy enough structure.
You being a San Francisco guy, I'm sure know Scott Capurro.
Yeah, very well.
He was in here one time, and he said, I went to the Anne Frank house, and I thought, you need some merch. Let's sell some Anne Frankfurters in here. He has a whole bit on that. It's
Yeah.
humor. You know where the Domplatz is, obviously, in with a little obelisk in Amsterdam. And
Dam Square, you mean?
Dam Square. I thought it was
William
Platz.
Platz. What is that, German? Dam
Yeah,
Square.
wie sagt man auf Deutsch?
All
Platz. So I was meeting a friend.
It's the War Memorial. Is
that what that is?
obelisk. Yeah, I saw the Queen Beatrix put a wreath on it.
Yeah.
The first year I moved to Amsterdam, and there was some crazy person yelling in Dutch, and my Dutch girlfriend at the time, I said, "What's the man saying?" And this was as the Queen was putting the wreath on the War Memorial. Mm-hmm. The man was yelling, "You're all from different planets. Get to know each other."
It's kind of a good hashtag. So this was 85. I was in Amsterdam, and I was meeting a friend. And, of course, no cell phones, internet.
Meet me at the obelisk, yeah.
Yeah.
I would meet people there, too. It's a great meeting spot.
So what happened was I walked up the top step. There's a row of steps. I walked up the top step, standing by myself, looking out. And as I'm standing there, guy comes by, winks at me. Another guy comes by, gives me a long look and a smile. I'm like, what's going on here? And the one guy was like on a 10-speed and almost wiped out. And he came up and he's like going, so what's the deal? And I'm like, I'm waiting for somebody. And he goes, oh, you're American. You do know that if you stand on the top step, you're telling other gay guys that you're down for right now. And I go, no, I didn't know that, but I know that now. So apparently I was up there putting myself in the shop window like, hey, guys, these are the little things that you need to learn. I go, well, I'm going to get off the top step now. I don't want to stand up there. Sorry.
That's hilarious. You remember that, was it congressman at the airport in Minneapolis?
Tapped his foot or whatever?
He tapped his foot. I have restless leg syndrome, and I'm constantly tapping my foot. Why does my nervous tick have to be a gay pickup sign in Minnesota?
Letterman said, who knew that if you tapped your foot in a bathroom, you could start a party?
So, I think the World War I obsession is very fascinating. I think that period from 1880 until World War I started was like, there was so much creativity happening in France with avant-garde theater and then air balloons, and it seemed like such an exciting time in France. And this book that I read, which was Paris during World War I, so much had happened. And when the French helped us blockade at the Battle of Yorktown the British fleet, the French naval blockade. That's why we won the American Revolution and became independent from England. And in World War I, when the American soldiers landed in France, the American government sent a message to the French government that simply said, Lafayette, we are here, because the Marquis who had arranged the blockade was named Lafayette.
In fact, even before we declared war and joining some of the Canadian troops, we had the Lafayette Escadrille, which was a flying circus, more or less, that we named after Lafayette. And it's funny, you look back at pilots back then. Do you know who they picked to be pilots? Guys who knew how to drive cars. Because not many people knew how to do that.
Right, it was a brand new invention.
Yeah, but you think about that, the War of 1870, which the French we call it the Franco-Prussian War, which was really done out of French hubris, and then the Germans won it, and they said, here's our bill, which was like 14 million francs. We won, and you're going to pay for everything. That was kind of a real change, I think, too, in Paris, where they were sort of like, let's just, embrace life. We've been through enough, and I think that kind of led to that.
Right, because they had been humiliated. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So what are some other fascinating things about World War I? Mustard gas.
Well, the invention of mustard gas, it was a clash of ages. You had lancers, guys on horses with spears. You still had the Napoleonic way of fighting in battles, which was full frontal assault. You're walking into machine gun nests. You think about France with Foch and Joffre and Mangin. He was the guy that the Chemin de Dame had people charged. That's when the French had a mutiny. They're like, we're done. We're not fighting anymore. And so they brought in Pétain, And he said, the Americans are on their way. Just wait until they get here, and things are going to change. The funny thing is, Pétain was a hero in World War I, but when the Vichy government was set up in World War II, Pétain, I read a book about this, in his own thought that someone who loves France has to run this to make sure that the Germans don't screw us. So he runs the Vichy government, but in France he is regarded as the biggest traitor of all time. Where he was coming from a place was, I want to make sure that they don't screw us. But when you run the Vichy government, so he went from hero to zero there as well. But I love going, and when I'm in Paris, I love going to the École Militaire and seeing Napoleon's grave.
I went the last time I was in and I went there in October.
Ferdinand Foch's grave is like a sarcophagus being carried by like 6 statues of guys in the rain. The poilus, which they called them, the Marie Larise, the French troops wearing their horizon bleu uniforms. And it's just, and I love walking through the preserved trenches. Like if you go into the Oise and Picardy, these northern states, the Battle of the Somme, which kicked off in Albert, there are still some preserved trenches there. That's where the Gold Madonna is at a right angle. It still is. And there's actually a museum that's a tunnel that goes from one end of the town to the other. It's just, and I'm in seventh heaven when I was going through those places.
Wow. I had a question and it just escaped my mind.
What did Steve Martin say? Oh, yes, I'm radioactive.
What are what are interesting, mind-blowing knowledge nuggets about San Francisco that you can share with us?
I think probably the number one thing is that no one lived in San Francisco, not even the Native Americans. It was too hilly, it was freezing, it was a big dud. Everyone lived on the east side, or Marin, or San Jose. For many years, even Sir Francis Drake went right by the gate. The East Bay Hills blended in. San Francisco Bay was discovered by Spanish explorers inland. They looked down from like Berkeley. And
right, because from the ocean, it all looks like one coastline.
It all blended in. But San Francisco was born during the gold rush because these ships would come from all over. And did you want to spend another hour going to Oakland, which you had to go to anyway to get to the Sierra? Everybody docked in Mission Bay, which is where we are right now. The water used to come to Montgomery Street. This is why the old ship saloon down the street, you break ground, you find a ship down there. The only people that lived here before that was the Army. They were out at Fort Point. So all of a sudden, commerce and hotels and residential and restaurants, this city was born in the only place in the Bay Area that's a freezing hellhole. That's why San Francisco was born. So we all wake up wherever we live in a nice sunny weather, and then we all come here and freeze our butts off.
I read years ago when I lived here that the Native Americans that lived in the Bay Area looked at San Francisco, the peninsula, as their magic healing ground, and that they would only come here when they were sick or needed to be healed of something, but they thought that if you stayed here too long, you would go crazy. Now, is that bullshit? Have you ever heard that?
Well, Mark Twain, the coldest summer I ever spent.
Was when an Asian tranny blew me with his finger up my ass. It's often misquoted.
That was the real quote? Samuel Clemens?
Here's something for you. I read a biography on Mark Twain last year. There's a couple of great books. You know what? The book about his world tour that he did is fascinating. But there was another biography that I read, and Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was a very good friend of Mark Twain.
No way.
Bram Stoker helped Mark Twain get his first theater gigs in London.
Wow. You think he called him Sam, or you think he called him Mark?
I don't know. But it just blows my mind to think of Bram Stoker and Mark Twain being friends, you know? What are you working on Bram? I got this story about this guy who dresses like a pimp, stays out all night, sucks on girls' necks. What are you working on, Mark? I got this story about this goofy kid who floats down a river on a raft with a runaway slave. Ain't no neck sucking in that book, Mark.
You know, I think it's
not
weird.
That kind of book, bro.
When we were growing up, we'd have these things like these humorists, like Will Rogers or William Saroyan. Like, you got to read these humorists. And so we would get this thing that's written like in 1928, and it would be like, old Dan is my hound dog. He doesn't hunt much, just sits around on the porch. Oh, he'll eat a bone if you throw it to him. That's it? Like, oh, this was high hilarity back during, the Depression. These are these humorists, and I am too much of a modern day kid. I need slapstick. I need fart jokes. Where is the humor in some of that?
Well, come on. You don't have any good Will Rogers quotes?
Well, maybe Will Rogers is a bad example.
But but a lot of it, I've read Will Rogers. His biography is pretty fascinating.
What?
Because
Did you get that here?
During the Depression, and he's swimming in cash. So
Wow.
he bought up where the Will Rogers home is in Los Angeles. He bought that all the way to Will Rogers State Park, which is a beach between Santa Monica and Malibu. So he had this ranch house and this massive plot of land that went all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And he and his family would ride horses to the beach. And then when he died, they left that Will Rogers State Park beach to the state of California. And then when he was at what's the straits in Alaska? He was going on some
the Aleutians? No, it's the islands.
It's not the Bering Straits, right?
Yeah, the Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait?
Yeah, between Asia and North America.
Anyway, so he was off on this flight expedition with a friend of his. He felt that beans were the key to good health.
Good for the heart.
So he
They
was
make you
constantly eating canned beans.
Wow.
So there's your fart joke for you. So when he was writing the unfunny throwing the dog a bone bit, he probably was lifting an ass cheek and peeling one out.
Isn't it funny that the medicine that's supposed to keep you from flatulence is called Beano? That's got to be intentional, right?
The one and only great Will Rogers quote that I can think of, he says, "Everybody gets their fair share of ice. The rich in the summer and the poor in the winter."
Oh.
It's mildly, it's not it's not laugh out loud, but it is
Right.
It is like
I think that was my roundabout point, that it's not like high guffaw laughter. It's more like the human condition and sort of maybe even kind of like our classes and seeing that. I can see that. It's funny. Sometimes I forget because these guys were all in pictures, as they used to say, and I get them mixed up with Gene Autry, who bought the California Angels back in a little bit younger, of course. And then, of course, Tom Mix and all those other greats. Let's get into that on the next one.
Okay. Well, tell me now.
No, I mean, that's like my dad's era. I didn't know who Flicka or Trigger were. I had to be taught these things.
I just remember Roy Rogers as a kid. I mean, I remember the fast food chain he had. I always
right.
I always liked that because it had the burger bar, and you could put whatever you want. They gave you your meat patty and a bun, and then you went over to the burger bar and put whatever you wanted. As a kid, I thought that was pretty cool.
I remember a joke Reagan told, and he said he was campaigning for governor of California. He was going door to door, and some guy answered the door, and he's like, "I know you." "Well, how do I know you?" He goes, "I used to be in pictures." He goes, "What are your initials?" He goes, "RR." And he goes, "Honey, Roy Rogers is at the door." That was one of Reagan's jokes. Apparently it was a true story. Yeah, we're here for a lot of Reagan jokes.
Reagan I've been to the Reagan Library.
Simi Valley? Right?
Simi Valley.
Yeah.
And he had his own little, like a folder book with index cards on it. He would collect jokes for speeches. So he kind of worked on it. Wow. Worked on his act.
There was one, I was trying to remember where I was, but I thought I got to remember this line. If I ever need it, I'll steal it. Guy won an award, and he got up and he said, "Of all the awards I've ever won in my life, this is definitely the most recent." I thought that was good. I keep that. The other one was Nick Faldo said when the press was grilling him over the Ryder Cup, he said, I'm sure he didn't coin this, but it's the first time I heard it. "I'd like to thank the press from the heart of my bottom." That's another good one. Keep that on an index card, Tom.
Okay. There's a, like going through my divorce in January, I was reading Groucho Marx. Read his autobiography, Groucho and Me, and then Memoirs of a Mangy Lover. And then just, absorbing Groucho Marx quotes. He had a lot of great quotes. Unlike Will Rogers that, not a lot of it stands up. But there was one quote by Groucho Marx. He said, in his 70s, he said that he had 5 honorary doctorate degrees from universities around America. He had some citizen medal from the president, and he named like 5 or 6 honors that he had been given in his lifetime. And then he said, I'd trade them all for one erection.
I always think about Annie Hall, where, Woody Allen quotes his, I don't want to belong to a club that would have someone as like me as a member.
Yeah, Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
In London, there's the Groucho Club.
Is there really?
Yeah, and it's for film and television people. It's a private club, and comedians are always welcome there.
Yeah.
And, I wouldn't want to belong to a club that would have me as a member.
Was he, by the way, my parking meter is going to go out in 4 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure. So we got to end it in 4.
Is that okay to wrap it up a little bit? Or you can wait.
I've never been bossed around on my own podcast, but I guess
this is Rick Hard Out Tittle with Tom Rhodes.
Hard out. Wow, that's such a Los Angeles thing to say.
$92 parking ticket. I apologize. But was Groucho curmudgeonly and irascible, as I've heard?
Yes. But and then you read it. A lot of his stuff wouldn't hold up in the Me Too era because it's all about getting near the young lass and
the broads.
The broads and the what a set of wheels and cans on that woman.
Hot tomato.
So, what is your favorite street joke?
Favorite dirty joke?
Yeah, sure.
My gosh.
Trying to end this on a happy note before the meter made.
I know. Wow. I love Gilbert Gottfried's one-liners. And just things like, they just come one right after the other. But the one that I always think of is kid comes home from school and he says, Mom, today the teacher asked a question and I was the only one in the class that knew the right answer. And I go, what's the question? Who farted? Just little things like that. Don't laugh too hard.
I always like that joke where the kid, he's younger guy, looks in the keyhole of the bedroom of his older sister, and she's naked on the bed, and she's rubbing herself, saying, "I need a man, I need a man." And then the next day, he looks through the keyhole, and there's a man on top of his sister. So he runs to his room, takes off all of his clothes, and he jumps on his bed and starts touching himself naked, saying, "I need a bike, I need a bike, I need a bike."
I love Gilbert. Hey, listen, this is
Rick. It's an honor.
It's a lot of fun.
We should go into business together one day.
I'm you know where I am. I've been doing the show for 18 years. I'm pretty easy to find.
And titillating is one of my favorite words in the English language.
Thank you. Mine is the island of Rhodes. I can't get enough of it. And when in Greece.
The Colossus.
Exactly.
A Colossus titillation.
And you are the Colossus.
That's why I might call this episode
comedy.
The Colossus titillation.
Let's do it. People will click on it and go, oh, that was misleading.
Okay, Rick. Well, take care of your car. And thanks for listening, everybody.
It's a fun hour. Thank you.
We almost made it an hour.
It's fun.
But it was fun, and I really enjoy coming on your show every time I'm in San Francisco.
Well, we have a million more things to talk about.
We do. Okay, my brother. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. And if you, the scripts and the things that people have ordered that I found in my mom's attic will be sent out next week. And that's all we have for today. Long may you run, and shalom amigos y amigas from the Jerusalem of stand-up comedy, San Francisco. Any words of wisdom or?
I would just say, just remember that either there's gravity or the earth sucks.
That's it. All right, Rick Tittle, ladies and gentlemen.
Tom Rhodes, you're a funny man. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedian. Tom Rhodes, karate kick, baby, oh yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're a groovy dude. You go all around the world, telling jokes to all of the people. You are an international comedian. You're funny to everybody in every single country in the world. Tom Rhodes, I like you very much. I think you're talented and very wonderful. Tom Rhodes, you're the best guy in the world. I wanna be your friend, you should call me sometime. Here is my phone number, 603-644-0048. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tom Rhodes, you're an international comedic sensation. Tom Rhodes, I like to listen to your podcast. Tom Rhodes, you're the best man to ever walk on the earth.